Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
business editor and columnist Greg Jefferson.
We are recording this on January 20th, 2021, the date of the inauguration of our 46th president, Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris. It's a special edition of our Puro Politics podcast. You know, usually we do this at the beginning of the week, but we felt we wanted to weigh in on what happened today. And you know, obviously this is a really unusual situation that we're in. I mean, I think every new president, when they give their inaugural address and we have this transfer of power, there's an attempt to be reassuring to the country. And but I think that the stakes were a lot higher in this case because we were coming off of a riot at the Capitol 2 weeks ago in which supporters of Donald Trump, a mob who had basically been incited by Donald Trump to go and encourage members of Congress to block the election of Joe Biden. They ended up breaking in and causing all kinds of damage. 5 people ended up dying in this. So there were a lot of concerns about security with this inaugural. They were obviously we're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and a country as divided as any time I can remember in my lifetime. And so with all that in mind, you know, Joe Biden, you know, I think was aware of what he had to do today and with this inaugural. And so I'll start with that and just to ask you, Greg, you know, what your impressions were of you know, the tone of the inaugural and how it went.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, let me first say that I can't think of any lines from his 21-minute speech that we're going to be repeating for years to come. Right. But I mean, he did, you know, he was talking about a restoration of democracy. And, you know, a good deal of the speech was a repudiation of the Trump presidency over the last 4 years. Yet, you know, he was also trying to be as conciliatory as he could. But I mean, look, the setting, I mean, not only, you know, was the setting from which he was speaking the site of a riot 2 weeks ago, it was the site of Trump's impeachment a week ago.
That's right.
Now,
that's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the amount of turmoil, I mean, it's just unprecedented for a presidential inauguration to have had this much anxiety and you know, just chaos in the weeks ahead of it. So it was in some ways a very calming speech. At least that's what he intended it to be. And for all of kind of the madness over the last several weeks, and you know, the constant lying on, you know, from Donald Trump about the election results ahead of that, it felt like almost a traditional inaugural address. I mean, it was remarkable to me in that way.
Yeah, and it was very much about, there was the message of whether you supported me or not, I'm going to listen to you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be a president for all Americans, for representing all of you, which is similar to what we've heard from other presidents. But it's, I think, just because of the context, things like that, mm-hmm. which are, you know, we're used to hearing that from newly inaugurated presidents. Somehow they seemed somewhat striking. Mm-hmm. Because we're right that we're just in this situation now where we have maybe a third of the country does not accept Joe Biden as president, believes he stole the election or whatever, and so mm-hmm. that was, I think, a really it was to me what kind of surprised me was just that it felt very much like a sermon, and you know mm-hmm. I think we got used to Barack Obama, you know, at that, you know, when he delivered some of his greatest speeches, kind of employing some of the techniques and mm-hmm. you know, the dynamics that we would see maybe in the church, you know, that kind of the way he would kind of lift people up. It's not something we mm-hmm. necessarily associate with Joe Biden, though we know he's a really deeply religious person, but this mm-hmm. one had that sort of tone, you know, and I've thought a lot about how, you know, Joe Biden, this is the contradiction I find with Joe Biden, that he is clearly, has been in his political life, extremely ambitious. He got elected to the Senate at 29, was very open at the time about, the aspirations that he had for himself, ran for president in his mid 40s in 1988, ran again in 2008. So he's been a really ambitious person. But the Joe Biden that I see now at 78, the oldest president that we've ever had, what strikes me about him is that, he came into this election cycle. He'd already been vice president for 8 years. He'd been a senator for 36 years. I think when he decided not to run in 2016, I really think he thought that was it for him, for his political career. He probably thought Hillary Clinton's going to win. I'm done. And even after,
exactly. She'll win re-election 8 years, so we're talking 8 years from now. So forget this.
Go back and look at his 2016 convention speech, and it sounds pretty much like a guy at the end of his career. And so I think that he probably, over the course of 2017, he said it was Charlottesville, what happened there, that really got him thinking about running. I don't know, but I do think that he was at peace with the idea that his political career was pretty much over. He had a legacy, a pretty substantial legacy behind him already. So I don't think he's coming into this in the way that maybe some presidents do, where they're still carving out a legacy for themselves. I think he really is entering the White House knowing that he's near the end of his career. Who knows if he'll even seek a second term, but he wants to be this kind of stabilizing figure at a time when things are really unstable. And that's what the speech felt like to me. I'm trying to kind of restore stability in some way.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that you're right, like the presidency is really the end of the line for Joe Biden. There are no, he might get a book deal after his presidency, but there's no, it's unlikely that he's going to have a really substantial life after the presidency, like Bill Clinton and the Global Clinton Foundation,
right.
And with Obama, with this, mega book deal and all kinds of public appearances. That's not going to be Joe Biden. So I think you're right. Like that prospect has kind of a leavening effect. Like we kind of accept, if you accept the legitimacy of his election, and you should, because it was legitimate, he really does seem to have, the nation's interests at heart. I mean, there's not much in it for him, post presidency. So I mean, he's in it to restore, the U.S. prestige, to address the pandemic, the economic fallout. I mean, you do get that sense that this is he truly cares about this.
I wanted to read something, a snippet from Inaugural Address, and wanted to have had a point I went to make after this, but. So what I'm going to read is this. When we listen to the better angels of our nature, we find that they celebrate the simple things, the basic things such as goodness, decency, love, kindness. Greatness comes in simple trappings. The simple things are the ones needed today if we're to surmount what divides us and cement what unites us. To lower our voices would be a simple thing. And then you cannot learn from one another. We cannot learn from one another until we stop shouting at one another, unless we speak quietly enough so that our words can be heard as well as our voices. This sounds, what I just read sounds like something that could have been in Joe Biden's speech today. It's pretty consistent with the tone that we heard from him today. But this is actually from the 1969 inaugural address given by Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon is remembered for many things. He's not necessarily thought of as the great unifier or the man who brought healing to the country. He kind of won by he benefited from the Southern strategy, which divided Southern whites and blacks.
I mean, like in a lot of ways, he's responsible for this really awful political environment we're in now.
Exactly.
Cleaving off Southern states. Yeah. But anyway.
But Nixon came in after this horrible 1968 in which we had Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy assassinated. We had protesters getting pummeled by police at the Chicago Democratic Convention. It was, the Vietnam War was ongoing. So Nixon came in with the idea that, everybody's shouting at each other and we just need to start listening to each other. And I think that was maybe just coincidentally, a very, very similar, the tone that he adopted was similar to what Biden talked about. He talked about, we have to, that unity is something that some people would call a foolish fantasy, but it's the only way forward. He said that there are lies and there's truth, and we have to be committed to the truth. So much of it was about there are all these old established norms that we've sort of lost sight of, and we have to try to find them again. And I mean, I guess my question for you is like, how. What chance do we really have in light of what we've seen, the division that we've seen? Because so much of it seems, when he talks about lies and truth, there's no doubt about that we've got a problem in this country with that issue. But so much of it seems to be rooted in social media, for example, which I don't think anybody's really got a good grip on how we rein in all the disinformation there. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, politics, at least in the modern era, has never been more tribal than it's been over the last 4 years. But it's even within the last 4 years, it's gotten much worse in 2020. So when Nixon gave that speech in 1969, I mean, that we were really at the beginning of that split between kind of the grassroots conservative movement and the mainstream, and that it accelerated. It occurred over a matter of decades, but it's really accelerated under Trump to the point where you've like you mentioned, you've got a third of the electorate who just doesn't believe that the president who was sworn in today is in that office legitimately. That's a huge problem. And I think you don't want to pay too much attention to the congresswoman from QAnon, but as soon as he her first tweet was impeach Biden, and he had just been sworn in. It's unlikely that she's going to be repudiated by her Republican colleagues for that tweet. They may not embrace her, but it's emblematic of kind of the undercurrent of congressional politics these days. I mean, you've got kind of a lunatic fringe that's still got sway over a sizable part of the election or the electorate, and that's going to be a major obstacle for President Biden. And the question is it an insurmountable obstacle? We just don't know yet.
One of the things that's interesting is, I mean, he's kind of picking as his first big legislative lift the issue of immigration and trying to do something comprehensive with that, and to basically bring undocumented immigrants, the 11 million or so in the United States, put them on a path to citizenship. It's something that's been talked about for a long time. I think it's probably going to be really difficult in this congressional climate, but one of the things that does strike me is that, if you think about Mitch McConnell, who's been the Senate Majority Leader, will now be the minority leader. Now the Democrats will have the majority there. Is that Mitch McConnell? I think Biden may benefit somewhat by the fact that Mitch McConnell had such a public falling out with Donald Trump. That Mitch McConnell was so angry about the fact that Donald Trump basically put Mitch McConnell's life at risk, because he basically incited this mob, and it was so obvious. The election had been decided. All the states had certified their results. The electors had voted, and Trump is still trying to stir this thing up 2 weeks before the inauguration. And so I think Mitch McConnell is so angry that he might be at a point. He's not going to necessarily agree with Biden on policy, but I think there might be some part of him that's almost relieved to be talking to somebody who's not who might not put his life at risk.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, with Mitch McConnell, I mean, I think his anger at Trump has been palpable.
Yeah.
and like clearly they've never had, they never had a warm working relationship. But Mitch McConnell was a facilitator of Donald Trump's, and that was that was discouraging to see, throughout most of Trump's 4 years. But I do get the sense now that he's angry, yes, but I also get the sense that McConnell really, he's not only done with Trump, but I think he wants to do as much as he can to squeeze Trumpism out of the Republican Party. And it's just the political reality, the fact that you've still got a major part of the conservative electorate believing Trump's election was stolen from him is, how does he maneuver that? Like, how does he reform the Republican Party? I don't know. We'll see.
This is the amazing thing. And of course, in Trump's final hours as president, the story started coming out and I tend to think this is unlikely, but apparently Trump was talking privately in the White House in his final days about possibly starting a party of his own, because he's really put out with his fellow Republicans who he thinks didn't stand behind him enough. He's talked about forming a party called the Patriot Party, which would pretty much, if Trump did that and decided to run again, it would pretty much destroy the Republican Party for a generation at least. Because I mean, you're probably talking about a presidential election where you'd have Trump getting 25%, the Republican candidate getting 25%, and the Democrat just cruising to victory. I mean, it would just be just a nightmare for the Republican Party. If that, I tend to think that won't happen. It might just be Trump's anger.
If it did, think of the irony of it. Like, think back to Lindsey Graham ahead of the, in the GOP presidential primary of 2016. Yeah. I'm paraphrasing here, but if we nominate Donald Trump, that will destroy the Republican Party, and we will deserve it.
That's right.
And what you're describing is exactly that.
Yeah,
we know that Senator Graham feels differently now, but he was probably right on when he said that 5 years ago.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the symbolism, because that's always a big part of the inaugural. I remember when I was a kid how it really grabbed my attention when Jimmy Carter, coming in after, a couple of years after the end of Watergate, when there had been so much talk about the Nixon's imperial presidency, Jimmy Carter on the ride back to the White House along Pennsylvania Avenue, he and Rosalind Carter got out of the car, walked to the White House, and there was just it again, just a purely symbolic thing. But in that moment, it was like we are sort of trying to convey the idea that this president is not going to be all the big trappings, ceremonial trappings. We're not going in for. We want to be closer to the people. So there's always some symbolism. One of the things that was interesting is if we go back to Tuesday, the day before Biden's inaugural, there was a ceremony in which you had 400 lights in commemoration of the 400,000 Americans who have died from COVID-19 pandemic. They had these lights along the reflecting pool on the National Mall. You had, this really sort of somber event. You had a nurse singing Amazing Grace. And then, today during his during Biden's inaugural speech, he called for a moment of silence in honor of those who have lost their lives to COVID-19. I think this was really interesting because in the 10 or 11 months that the United States has been dealing with this, Donald Trump really never ever took a moment to say, let's have a moment where we're recognizing or paying tribute to people who've died from this. I think there was something about that's in his nature that he felt that if we spend too much time acknowledging the loss of life, it's basically like Trump acknowledging that he's failed in some way, or it's a critique of his presidency. So he just never really wanted. And in Trump's farewell speech, which he gave Wednesday morning, he did, I think, and this felt like very much a response to the fact that Biden had the Tuesday night ceremony. Trump did say, we want to think about the people who've died. But he never really did that before. And that was, I think so. Biden was clearly trying to say, we're going to have a president who has some empathy here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got the sense that, President Trump thought about the pandemic primarily in terms of his reelection and how it might threaten his reelection. And like, it was politicized from the beginning. What was refreshing about the ceremony last night and the moment of silence was it really felt to me like it was, finally a national leader was depoliticizing this.
Yes.
And, acknowledging the human cost of it, 400,000 people dead in a 1-year time frame. And finally, somebody is honoring that, right. Paying honor to the victims. And we just hadn't had that before. I thought that was really remarkable.
Yeah, if you think of it, obviously this it's a completely different situation. But if you just think in terms of the loss of life, this is like having about 130 9/11s happen. And obviously nothing could match how horrifying that was, and the violent nature in which those people passed away. But just such a loss of life. And I don't think George W. Bush would have considered, well, I don't really want to. I don't want to really pay tribute to the people who've died from 9/11 because it's going to make me look bad. Or, I don't think whatever anybody wants to say about George W. Bush, I don't think that would have been in his mind at all. But with Trump, it seemed like something that he was very defensive about. I wanted to, before we wrap things up, just kind of get a sense from you if there were any sort of little moments, so much focus goes into, just little symbolic moments, what people are wearing, what the performances. I just wanted to mention, I just want to mention that, like, my personal favorite moment, non-substantive favorite moment was when J-Lo came out to sing a medley of This Land Is Your Land and America the Beautiful. And toward the end, there was kind of a dramatic pause, and she threw in a little "Let's Get Loud," which J-Lo fans will know was one of her hits years back. And I just thought, man, that's why J-Lo is J-Lo, because she's thinking, like, I know this is Joe Biden's inaugural, but I am not going to pass up an opportunity to plug my catalog.
I was doing a phone interview at that moment. I missed J-Lo, so I was hoping you'd caught her, because I know you're a big J-Lo fan.
Well, there's nothing. It's rare for anything to be so smooth to have in a medley, a patriotic medley, to go from "Let's Get Loud" because this land is your land. That was a really interesting little twist that she put on that.
And my God, what did you think of Amanda Gorman, the poet laureate? I mean, that gave me chills. I mean, amazing. Like her rendering of that poem was amazing. I mean,
yeah, she's a 22-year-old. Yeah, Amanda Gorman's 22-year-old African-American woman from the Los Angeles area, and just delivered this amazing poem. And I know that I've been feeling kind of like down the last couple of weeks, ever since the Capitol riot. Just that sort of feeling of, like, what's sort of become of this country. I think a lot of people have felt that way, and to see her there, and just how eloquent and insightful she was, and it was optimistic, but it didn't feel like kind of a fake forced optimism. One line that's getting quoted a lot, I think, was toward the end of her poem, when she said that there's always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And I just thought, what a contrast this was to what we saw a couple of weeks ago at the Capitol, and also just that feeling of, like, wow, if there are some more people, 22-year-olds out there like her, like, this country might actually have there may be some reason for hope, going forward. I don't want to be too gloomy, but it's been a tough, with the pandemic and the political division, it's been a tough time. And I think that I just had this feeling of, like, wow, there's hope on the, that's on the way. And
and if Amanda Gorman's reading of her poem didn't give you hope, then there was always Garth Brooks singing Amazing Grace. He's still alive. He's still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think of his performance, Gilbert? Come on, be honest.
I mean, I've never been a big Garth fan. I actually made some enemies back in the day when I was living in Dallas, and he did like 4 nights at Texas Stadium for a TV special, and they invited me on one of the TV channels to talk about what I thought about it, and then I was kind of lukewarm, and I think people hated me after that. But yeah, so I will say that I think, politically speaking, it was probably canny on the part of the Biden forces to say, we got to, for those of you in flyover country, for those of you in the what we think of red America, what would you say? What would you, the Garth Brooks fan base? Help me out here so I don't say anything.
America?
I don't want to
are you telling me you're not in touch with the fan base of Garth Brooks? I don't know. I would say, like Red America, I'd say that's pretty good. I mean, maybe the coastal elites aren't so in love with Garth Brooks as we might find in the hinterlands. I'm thinking like Wyoming comes to mind, Nebraska, my home state of Indiana. I know they love Garth Brooks there. So I know what you're talking about.
It's basically, the forgive me, the hillbilly elegy sort of America, maybe, anyway, so we might want to.
By the way, that was a bad book in a worse movie. They somehow made it into a worse movie, but
I heard the movie was horrible, and I couldn't I wasn't sure I could handle that, but so I think that it was, it was the Biden team's attempt to say, we're here for you too. We're listening to you, and we're giving you some Garth Brooks, and it's unity. I don't know. It's
my only complaint about his performance was after the performance. He was a little huggy, and he shook a lot of hands. I don't think they filled him in on the pandemic protocol.
He was probably kind of excitable,
Right.
Well, anyway, so we're gonna leave things there, and we will be back next week. And I think next week we'll be talking, and we got a lot of local issues to talk about. But we wanted to get a chance to talk to you all about the inaugural, and hope everybody's doing well. And we'll be back soon. Take care.